Well, welcome to May. And I know that the folks back east have been enjoying spring, but this is the first day of spring we've really had. It has been just downright nasty and cold, and today is actually a nice day. And it's a good opportunity to do a video. Now, I told you in the last couple videos that Sean and me are really getting tired of laying track, and that hasn't changed. We're actually very excited. We're actually going to be doing some scenery and different things like that. Oh, there's still a little track being laid here and there, but we're starting to get things going for operations. And scenery just happens to be something that we're all kind of looking forward to, a nice change of pace. If you've been following on the Facebook page, there was you know that I got a Chinese laser cutter. And a request was, hey, they wanted a review on it. And so this month is going to be about, well, Chinese laser cutters and what's going on. So this is not really going to be a how-to. It's just what I've discovered, what I've learned, how you can make these things work for you. And they really are about model building and doing scenery. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we're not going that way. We're going that way. Well, welcome to my shop. My wife and me do quite a bit of work out here. My wife is quite the craft person, and she uses it a lot, as well as I do. It's a full wood shop. It doesn't have every tool, but it has the basic tools that we need to do a lot of different projects in here. This is, of course, the newest tool that's been brought into the shop. Now, my shop is shared with my automobiles, just like everybody else's garage. When I designed the house, it was a little bigger, so I'd have room for such things as this. So, let's talk about Chinese lasers. Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is I researched, and I researched, and I researched. Because you see these from companies here in the U.S., and they're going for about $3,000. And then you go to eBay and you find one of these, and they're about $350 to $400. And you kind of look at it and go, okay, what's different? And so that's where I started my research and where I got into this. And there is plenty of differences. My first response to you is, if you are looking for a plug and play, in other words, I'm going to be able to plug it in and be able to just install the software into the computer and begin building projects, this is not for you. If you are handy and have some electronic skills, understand stepper motors and electronics and how those all work, I've got a solution for you. All said and done, I've got maybe about $900 invested into this project. Now, that seems like a lot if you've never looked in lasers, but as I pointed out, if you're buying them here in the U.S. And you're buying a company that's all ready to plug and play, you're going to pay about $3,000. So, right away, I'm up $2,000 before we even get started. That's a good fair trade for me. I have the skills. I actually work on electronics at work, and I work with stepper motors and robots at work. So for me, it wasn't a difficult thing. The only thing I didn't know and didn't understand was the lasers, because typically we don't shoot people in the lab with lasers. It's not our job. But nonetheless, here we go. Let's take a look at what we got here. So let's talk about safety. Now, this doesn't matter if you're buying a U.S. one or you're buying a Chinese one. These are not a toy. They are a tool, and they can be dangerous, just like a table saw. One of the biggest things that is a risk with these is you're talking, depending on what your wattage is, somewhere between 10,000 to as much as 20,000 volts. Now, granted, the amperage is low, but 20,000 volts at even 3 amps going across your heart will stop it, and you will be dead. So, the voltage is real here. So when it says it needs to be grounded, you need to ground it. That's an absolute. Do not play around. They need to be grounded. You want that to get out there. If you do work on them, if you work on that laser, there are high voltages involved in it. And so if you're not familiar with high voltages, I really would recommend maybe get hooked up with someone, learn about high voltages and how to deal with it, because I don't want to hear that a fellow modeler died because they were playing around with one of these things. That all said and done, they are safe. The American ones have a lot more safety features on them. The Chinese, they don't have quite the things. You can open the doors up and do all those things. But to be fair, most of the Americans bypass all the safety anyway. I know I do on my table saw. So that being said, be safe. Be aware of what you're working with. So let's talk about what these lasers are. They basically are manufactured from a couple different companies, but they all pretty much have very similar designs. The electronics are a little different here, a little different there, a little different there. The software that they use, there are some subtle differences, but for the most part, they're all pretty much the same. If you were to say, well, what's the best software? I took a look at three of the different ones that came out with them. The one I'm using right now is called LaserCAD. The one that was used before this was Corel Laser, which is used by the company that originally made these boards that were in this system. That's the crudest of them. LaserWorks is another one by another company that makes a panel very similar to this one that I've installed in here. In hindsight, I think I like the LaserWorks software a little better, but they all do about the same thing, and frankly, I can get anything done on all three of them. So software-wise, they're all pretty, they're not up to American standards, but you can get the job done, and that's what I'm trying to say with them. The electronics that come with them. These electronics that come with them, they are very simple, very not as sophisticated as we would see in a US product, but they function, and they function extremely well. The problem I had with these was that this is an engraver / cutter. It probably does a really super job on engraving. If you want to take an image and a simple JPEG and engrave it onto a piece of wood, this probably would have worked very well. When I did some vector cutting with it, simple cuts like circles and squares and stars, just to see if the stepper motors were functioning right when I first got it, it functioned just fine with that. But when I started getting into some much more complicated drawings, to be fair, the amount of memory that's on this probably is nil to almost non-existent, and it really struggled. Matter of fact, it had gone crazy. And that was what forced me to do my first upgrade right away, which was replacing all the electronics. The other thing that it came out was it had just a master switch, and I'm going to flip my master switch on. The master switch originally on the system started up the fan for the exhaust fan. It fired up the pump system, and it also charged the laser. Now the laser was ready to go, and you could hit a button on here. This is the original panel that was on here, and these electronics right here were back behind it. So you would fire it up, and the laser would immediately be hot, and I'd have to come up here and hit this laser switch to turn the laser off. The way I have it set now is the main comes on, I can turn the pump on, I can turn the fan on, and then I can power the laser all separately with different switches. So that was some of the remodifications I did. Originally, this just gave me it in percentage of power. You can overcharge a laser. A laser tube, you should get between 1,000 and 1,500 hours out of them. But if you overcharge them, in other words, this laser here, you're probably only going to get about 32 watts out of it, which we'll get into that in just a minute, of power out of this thing. It has an electric source that could overdrive the laser, and it would give me more power out of there than that 32 watts, but the return is very poor. It actually kind of flat lines up at the top, so it has a nice steep curve as it comes up, and then it begins to taper off, and you're just basically throwing a lot of electricity and not getting much power return back off to it. You'll probably get around 30 watts, and then from like about 65% on, you're only gaining maybe a watt or two, and all you're doing is shortening the life of your laser by hours. And the laser tube works very much like a fluorescent tube, although that's an LED tube there, but a fluorescent tube. It just basically has a gas in there. The electricity goes in there, it excites it, it bounces on the mirrors, and it lasers the light and then sends it down through the mirroring system that goes through here. So just be aware of it, that you can overpower these things. So, and shorten the life of it. So anyway, originally when you hit it, you just hit the main switch and the laser was on. I had to reach up and turn it off. I immediately wanted to change that. Other than that, this particular model, although some of the models do, did not include a milliamp meter. And that's really how you know where your laser is at and your performance. You can set percentages in here, and you can overdrive it. Now, the new program in here won't, you can't set it beyond the point of which I've already determined. And that was a lot of what I had to do, is research where was my wattage, where did I find it? Well, temporary interruption of power there. And so I'm going to try and pick up where I left off. So my laser is set to a power level that will not overdrive it. And I should get a good 1,000 hours worth of work out of it. Now, projects can take some time. Most of the projects I've done already, I think the longest one I've done is 15 minutes. But we'll get into that a little later on. Wattage and power. That's how the laser is measured. Now, a laser is measured in watts. This is a 40-watt Chinese laser. In all actuality, it's probably about 32 watts. The Chinese are telling you how many watts of electricity power is available, not how many watts of laser power is available. You can overdrive it, as I stated earlier, and get more, but you're not really getting the full power. So this is about a 32-watt laser. If you buy a 50-watt from them, you're going to get about 45 watts of power, and if you get a 60, you're going to get about 52 watts of power. Now, don't be intimidated by that. This is a 32-watt power. This is plexiglass, acrylic plexiglass. This is probably about 3 millimeters thick. I cut this with no problem. I'm actually going to bring up, this is one of my tools that I made. This is for focusing the laser. And it cut it with no problem whatsoever. Did an absolutely fantastic job on it. The ends are polished and no issues whatsoever. The other thing is these are my standoffs that I made, and it cut these. This is probably a project that took it 10 minutes to make, I don't know, 16 standoffs. So not a huge consumption of time to do most of these projects. With the advantage of using a 50 watt, a true 50 watt, or a 60 watt, is I could probably cut that faster. I could also cut thicker than 3 millimeter. I have already experimented a little bit with my laser. I can cut 5 millimeter plexiglass, acrylic plexiglass, with no problem whatsoever. There are some products that you do not want to cut with this. Any PVC you don't want to cut. That's going to release chlorine gas. Not really good for your laser, and definitely not good for you. Styrene, though, you can use. I haven't tried it with styrene. I've got plenty of it. It's on my list of things to try. I use wood. This is 3 millimeter thick wood, or 1/8 inch thick wood, plywood. cut it with no problem. I cut a couple boxes out of that. If you've been watching on the Facebook, I've been using 16th-inch basswood, and these are a couple of the projects that I've built. These are some flats, some house flats that I built. Most of these took no time whatsoever. Here's a window frame that I made. I'll set it up here. There's a window frame, and most of these projects I whipped through pretty fast. Now, one of the things you're going to learn with doing with these is you're going to have to, the lens that came with the Chinese laser originally is a 2.5-inch lens. That's its focal point. So the focal point from where the laser light hits the lens and comes out, from that to about the middle of your project should be about 2.5 inches. And that's how they originally had it set up to begin with. It's set at that length. But to be fair, a 2.5-inch lens is really good for, it gives you good penetration, but its beam is very wide. And so if you're doing something like a model like these, it's not the best lens to use. Actually, an 1.5 lens is better, and that is something that you might want to make an upgrade. I have all three typical sizes, which is an 1.5, 2 inch, and a 2.5 inch lens. I have all three of those in here, and I keep them. Very, very useful to have all different sizes based on what you're cutting. The panel that I cut here on the, when I replaced this metal panel out, I put in an acrylic panel in to mount all the switches and all the electronics. I replaced this with an acrylic panel, and I cut it with the 2.5 inch, and it cut it lickety-split with no problem. So again, it was still 3 millimeter, which brings you to something that you're going to actually spend a little time doing with this, is you're going to work with different products, and you want to keep track of your settings so the next time you use it, you know what it is. So with the acrylic, when I used the 2.5 inch, I could set it at 15 millimeters a second, where when I used it with an 1.5 lens, I had to slow it down to 5 millimeters. With the 2 inch, I could do about 25% power. With the 1.5 lens, I had to up the power to about 35%. Neither one of them are overdriving the lens in any stretch, but it definitely gives you an idea that you're going to spend a little time deciding how you want to cut it and how it looks, which is why you end up building a tool right here that's set at 5 millimeter steps, so you can actually get your material, your lens focused on the product that you're working on. So lenses are one of the things that I did for an upgrade. As I talked about, I did upgrade the electronics. I went through this thing and literally gutted a lot of it out and rebuilt it. I wanted to put all the power supplies on switches, so I rewired all of that. The new controller I have in here, you don't have to have a computer hooked up to it, although I find that I use the computer an awful lot. Now, talking about computer work, I want to make sure you understand, most of the drawings are done in either Corel, Adobe Illustrator, Inkscape. There's a lot of different graphics, and you're going to do a lot of vector drawing. And so you're going to do those drawings. I do a lot of those right there. I then import them. I can take that file and put them into an AutoCAD. You can use AutoCAD. I can take that into an AutoCAD file, and I can actually install it straight into here via thumb drive and work with it. But I find that I use the computer a little more to tweak it. I set orders up. I set how I want it to cut. I set the power settings and everything else. Then I just download it through a USB cable into the laser, and then I just go ahead and shoot it. And it works fine for me. I find that is the best for me. Now, I'm not saying that's the best for everyone, but I find that to be the best for me, and that's how I kind of work with it. So a lot of the electronics I actually put in, the milliamp and all of that I put in here so that I could keep track of what's going on. The other thing that I did, I put in air assist. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I see a lot of people and they put air assist in there and they're hitting it with a ton of air. Actually, the purpose of air assist is to just kind of keep the smoke out of the way, keep some of the debris, keep a positive flow between the lens and like the acrylic, because it's basically melting and evaporating this stuff, and so that's in there. And you're only running between roughly 1 and 3 pounds of power of PSI of air, so you don't need a lot of air in there. I did put a new Z-bed into this, which a Z-bed allows me to raise and lower the project. That helps me on focusing this, so I could do different things like that. So that's another option I put into this. The other thing that you want to do is you want to vent this. It throws smoke. I mean, especially with the wood and the acrylic. Neither one of them are toxic, but you'll have a garage full of smoke if you don't vent them out. And so I have venting. It goes out through the back and goes right out the shop. And so this doesn't move. This is my workbench. This is where I work, and this is where I do this kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I at least have discovered from these things. As you can see, the projects I've done, they've turned out absolutely exceptional. If you've been following on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook page, you know that I've got some very particular buildings that I'm going to do. In particular, the Longmont sugar mill, the Loveland sugar mill, and those projects will be much easier to do with a laser cutter. The other thing is, I want to do houses, and I've got some photographs of certain buildings that I want to actually build that are they're buildings that are indigenous and very much mark the area that I'm modeling, and they don't have kits for them, so I have to find a way to make them myself. And so the best way to do that is to do it on a laser cutter. To give you an idea, I built these two houses, these flats, out of a sheet of 16th inch, 6 inches by 36 inches of basswood. And actually, and believe me, learning, I've cut it out several times, but so I have an idea of it. Out of that piece of basswood that I paid $5 for, I actually cut the house out about 4 times. So you can get 4 to 5 houses out of that 16th inch, 6 inch by 36 inch basswood. You can get 6 house flats out of them very easily. So you're talking less than $1 to do that. So there is some cost savings on this. The other thing is when I'm working with certain projects, I want to be able to, if I were to build the kit, let's say, I'll take an example. I've got a couple buildings I want to do in Denver, and if I were to build them from scratch or something like that, I would be spending a ton of money. But by buying acrylic and some other products that I can use with it, I'll actually be able to build the building, a fair-sized building, and you'll see them as time comes on. I'll highlight them as they get built. Relatively inexpensive. So it is a cost savings from that standpoint. So it's not just, hey, I spent $1,000 and now I can do all these great amounts. I'm actually going to be saving some money with the tool. Now there is a learning curve, so I'm going to have to, do a few, but it's not that hard, and I really find it quite enjoyable. I actually sit down in the evening and I look for houses from either photographs that Ken has done, and I take those and I kind of, I don't do them exactly because I kind of want a certain feel, but I do take those images and try and get them to be representative of what the building is that I'm doing there. So that's kind of what's going on. I hope this is helpful. If you are looking at getting one of these Chinese laser cutters, I will say they will do the job. They do a fair job. You might have to invest some money into it if you're not comfortable with doing electronics and that type of work, and you want to get one. I'd highly recommend getting either one from Micromark or Full Spectrum Laser or any of the U.S. companies that are out there. They do a fine job. But I will say this with them, in any of them. One of the things you're going to have to do, and I had to do this on the Chinese one, and I've talked to some other folks that have them, you're going to have to take and level out your rails and your gantry that your laser head runs on. And I had to shim this up a couple thousandths of an inch to make them true and plumb and fair, so that I can actually cut on any quadrant of my laser and get the exact same cut. And that took some time. That was a lot of the time that I spent disassembling this and loosening up the parts and then getting them all true and plumb. And that took me a good solid 6 hours of work and somewhat being frustrated at times, but I did do it. And a lot of, I'm going to give you a hint with learning on these things. I take, this is some 110-pound cardstock, and I've shot these with the laser just to see that how my drawing turned out, make sure it's going to do a lot of different things. I can actually hit this and say box, and the laser is actually boxing the project that I last did, so I can see that my product is going to fit. But sometimes I got projects that are a little bigger and I want to see how they turn out. I want to get a feel for what them. So by doing them on a drawing of 1-to-1, and it also gives me a chance to shoot it as a paper and see if it's going to work. Matter of fact, one of the first projects I did with paper was this control panel, and I basically cut it out with paper, and I literally lifted up the lid and put this in and said, okay, how does the switches fit? How does it all fit in there? And I could lay it in there and see. So, 110-pound paper is much cheaper than the acrylic, which is only $5, but nonetheless, this is cheaper to use, and I can shoot it as many times as I want to, and I'm still nowhere near $5 if I make a mistake. And then once I'm happy with it, I go ahead and shoot it as is. So in any case, that's this month's update. I hope it's enjoyable. If you are looking at lasers, I am absolutely just enjoying the project and building these projects. I'm really looking forward to doing larger models as time goes on, but this is a good cut your teeth on it and figure out what you're doing and make mistakes and then learn from that and move forward. Because if you're modeling and you're not making mistakes, you aren't really doing a good job. I'm being honest with you. As a matter of fact, I had to actually contact a few folks, Jim Rint in particular. I had to contact Jim and say, hey, Jim, I'm having a problem. Can you give me some tips? And Jim was really helpful. And he put me also in contact with another friend of mine who I know, Joe D'Amato, if any of you know that I appear once in a while, get down to see Joe and Bruce Kelly. And Joe helped me out with some other stuff. And so I am really enjoying this, and I can't wait to show the models that we begin to turn out on this. So that's this month. Until next time, happy modeling.